Under Biden, our young people own nothing and they are miserable. Donald Trump refuses to accept this fake, pathetic, mutilated version of the American dream. When he was president, young people were richer than ever before, and he will do it again.
And that was Charlie Kirk there speaking at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee last July. The Trump ally also spoke at the RNC back in 2020 during the president's first term in the White House. Joining us now with more on Charlie Kirk is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, thanks for being with us on this day. Help us take a step back and give us some perspective on Kirk's role in today's conservative movement. It is hard to understate the scope of his influence.
Yeah, especially among younger conservatives or younger Republican voters, or those at least that spend a lot of time online. Kirk began his Turning Point USA organization about 12 years ago when he was only about 18, and inspired by the Tea Party movement, built it from there. It now includes Turning Point USA, which is more of a political arm, and then even Turning Point Faith, which is designed to organize among those that are more religiously conservative. And so, then there's a radio show, and there was podcasting, and there was a pretty vociferous social media feed that included highlights from the event like the one he was holding today, where you hold these, prove me wrong exchanges with people who may disagree with you. Like Anna said, one of the issues he talked a lot about in this country, guns in America. There would have been a conversation about that. Could have been something that was going on in the news or with sports. Certainly issues of faith and society in general, and then defending the Trump administration from those that disagreed with it. But the idea was that he would sit there, engage the person, try to have a, healthy and breezy back and forth. Maybe the other person walked away from it convinced. Maybe the other person walked away slightly angry. But the idea was he was trying to show his followers, you can have these kinds of healthy conversations, and here's how you can defend your viewpoint from the conservative perspective. And again, there are a lot of people in this country today, Nancy, who are learning about who he is for the first time. And that's because the way your social media feed works may not serve you that kind of content. That's to the detriment of everyone. You're not seeing the other side necessarily. And so this will be an opportunity for people to learn about maybe what he stood for and what he stood against, and whether you agree with it or not, that's what he was out there doing. And that it ended so violently and so unexpectedly is really going to be a profound marker on the conservative movement. You've seen the reaction from the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Defense, other senior White House officials like Stephen Miller, for example, others who work in the West Wing who were close with Charlie, who were inspired by the activism that he led, and in many cases may very well be in the jobs they're in because Charlie Kirk told the president, yeah, that guy should have that job, or she should be working in that part of the administration, because we know that during the transition last year, given what he had done to help mobilize the conservative vote for the president, given how close he'd become with the president and his son Donald Trump Jr. especially, he was at Mar-a-Lago in transition meetings, cherry-picking people for senior government roles, urged them to put Kash Patel at the FBI, would have steered them towards certain people to put in the cabinet, and then went out and used his movement to make sure that these people got the votes needed from fellow Republicans who may have been skeptical about their qualifications, and made sure they got their jobs. And others thinking ahead to the future of the party and the future of the MAGA movement knew that they had to be cultivating him and those that followed him, because they are the foot soldiers in the conservative movement today. And guys like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, and plenty of others are the ones that the party leans on now to help draw attention to issues or to certain candidates who may need some money and manpower, and to make sure that they understand why it is the president is doing what he's doing.
And Ed, the thing is, it's an incredible impact for someone who is just 31 years old, and yet he's been part of this conservative scene for quite some time. He started quite early on the grassroots level. Can you talk a little bit about that impact that not only he has had as a political figure in his own right, but also the movement he has helped spawn through Turning Point itself?
Well, yeah, and that's we heard some on our air earlier today saying how attending and speaking at a Turning Point event could be just as effective as speaking at a Trump rally in terms of the mileage you could get out of doing so. That clips of it would spread, that the word of mouth would spread, that the donations might come in, that the volunteers willing to show up to help you because they like something you talked about would suddenly materialize. That there was real equity, or you could get results, in essence, for being associated with them. There were conferences held by Turning Point and its various entities earlier this year that drew several senior Trump administration officials, because before their government work and during it, they understood they were there in part because he made it happen. He helped find the voters necessary in the swing states. He helped draw the support needed to make sure the Republican senators voted for them, maybe even some Democrats. And he was sustaining that support by talking about them, having them on as guests, and making sure that his followers knew about them. But again, we talk, Nancy, in this country about making sure that young voters are engaged and that they participate in the process. That is what he was doing, whether you agree with him or not, whether you find what he said, acceptable or vile. He was a voice in the system, and he was shaping the country to his liking through the work he was doing. And we've seen it on the left, we've seen it on the right, we've seen it among labor leaders, religious leaders, civil rights leaders through American history. He will rank as one of those kinds of activists that drew people to the streets, drew people to causes and events, and was gunned down way too soon.
An incredible legacy. I also find it noteworthy to see the reaction that has been pouring out, not only from leaders on the right, but also on the left, and notable names like Kamala Harris, former President Obama, former President Biden. I mean, it is rare to have the leaders on both sides be able to speak so movingly about one figure at this point.
Well, and most especially to denounce violence of all sorts, as they should. But also because, there are Democrats who were trying to take cues from him, trying to figure out how it is that you were convincing people to rally to your cause. I think the most notable example, that's why I'm pulling it up here, was the California governor, Gavin Newsom, who himself launched a podcast earlier this year. We've now seen the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, go out and do the same thing, because they understand the voters I need to reach, young, male, and either, right or center right, are out there, and they're out there listening to podcasts, and they're out there in the digital space. And they may be watching us right now on their phone or at home on their flat screen or their laptop. And Newsom specifically went to see him. They had an interview for Newsom's podcast. The governor was denounced for doing so. But at the same time, he said, look, this guy figured out how to tap the political marketplace successfully. We as a Democratic Party have to do so as well. And that's why I want to talk to him. And today, he was among the first national Democratic leaders to call the attack on Kirk disgusting, vile, and reprehensible. In the United States of America, we must reject political violence in every form. And, we'll continue to see how the country reacts to this in the coming hours. And again, a lot of people who knew him, and a lot of people have no idea what he did. And may this perhaps be an opportunity for people to try to get beyond what their algorithm serves them and learn a little bit about the other side, whether they like him and agree with him or not.
A very fair point there. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much for joining us with your insight. Okay, and we are following more breaking news. We're going to turn things now over to Weijia Jiang, who is joining us from the White House lawn. Weijia, when we talk about the scale and the scope of something like this, a tragedy like this, can you talk to us a little bit about how the White House is reacting?
Well, a lot of the officials inside the White House have known Charlie Kirk for years, since the first time President Trump served in office. During his re-election campaigns, they closely worked with Charlie Kirk. And of course, now they did work with him because he is was a close, trusted advisor of President Trump's, and somebody who many staffers knew incredibly well. So I can tell you, Nancy, that it has been a very somber day here at the White House, with many officials and other staff members visibly shaken, even crying, because this is such a huge loss for them, because they not only considered Charlie Kirk to be a colleague, but many of them were friends with him. And so it is a dark day here. Of course, as you've been reporting, President Trump himself has weighed in. He canceled a dinner that he was going to host here at the White House tonight, and he ordered that all American flags, including those here at the White House, be lowered to half-mast. So, we will continue to hear reaction from senior administration officials, I'm sure, throughout the coming days. But today is a tough one here, Nancy.
Absolutely, Weijia, and also to see this outpouring of from so many different leaders, it's striking to me because it's not only to see all of this. It's not for an elected leader, right? It's for someone who is not elected and yet has this huge influence. Given that, what do you think we can expect from the White House in the coming days?
Well, certainly I expect a lot of officials from the White House and probably President Trump himself to attend Charlie Kirk's funeral and to continue talking about his legacy and the mark that he left on American politics. Charlie Kirk has been here to the White House several times. I've seen him here many times, and the last time he was here at the end of May, the president had him in the Oval Office, and as he was talking about the youth vote and young people in America, he pointed to Charlie and spoke about how critical he was during his reelection campaign. The president often talks about how he won in part because of social media platforms, especially TikTok. And during that visit, he said Charlie was the first person to tell him, you need to engage on TikTok. And of course he did, and went on to win huge numbers when it came to young voters. And so, the president really credits Charlie Kirk for much of his political success, as do other Republicans who acknowledge and recognize that he wasn't just a public figure and that he was out there talking. He was obviously on the airwaves and made his own content, but he really understood young people and young Americans and resonated with them in a way that most people, Nancy, cannot.
A very sad day for this country. Weijia Jiang, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.